Hey guys, today we're going to dim the lights, settle into that cozy spot, and embark on a journey so ancient, so fundamentally human. It might just make your modern board game collection feel a little bit like a toddler's plaything. We're talking about the genesis of structured play, the primordial soup from which chess and Monopoly, or, their ancestors, eventually crawled. Forget your smart devices, your glowing screens. Tonight, we're peeling back the layers of millennia, trudging through the dust of forgotten empires, and really, truly unearthing the very first whispers of rules, turns, and victory conditions. You probably won't survive this epic deep dive without at least one yawn, so consider yourselves warned. Ancient beginnings, seeds of play. Imagine yourself not so much as a person, but as an echo, a flickering shadow stretching back across tens of thousands of years. You're huddled around a sputtering fire, the primal chill of the late Stone Age nipping at your heels. The world beyond the flickering light is a vast, untamed wilderness, filled with rustling leaves that could be supper, or could be supper. Life is a constant, raw negotiation with survival. Every waking moment is dedicated to finding food, shelter, fending off predators, or inventing new ways to avoid being someone else's dinner. Yet even in this harsh crucible, something extraordinary stirs within you. An urge. Not for sustenance, not for safety, but for pattern, for order. For the sheer, unadulterated joy of engaging with a system, however simple, that offers a fleeting sense of control over the unpredictable chaos of existence. You pick up a handful of polished pebbles, smooth and cool against your palm. Perhaps you arrange them in a line. Perhaps you assign them an arbitrary value. Perhaps you decide that the one with the faint reddish streak, is somehow special. This isn't just idle fidgeting. It's the very first flicker of formalized play. You're not merely tossing stones. You're thinking about tossing stones with a purpose beyond simply getting rid of them. The world around you is harsh, unpredictable, a cosmic dice roll where the stakes are always life or death. But here, with these pebbles, you're creating a miniature universe where you dictate the rules, even if just for a moment. It's the most basic form of escapism, a primordial virtual reality, if you will. And frankly, it's a lot cheaper than a modern gaming PC, which is a definite plus when your currency is flint shards and good intentions. Think about it, before we had agriculture, before permanent settlements, before writing, before even sophisticated tools, we had play. This isn't just about entertainment. It's about a fundamental cognitive leap. It's the ability to abstract, to create symbols, to understand cause and effect within a defined framework. You're not just chasing a woolly mammoth. You're conceptualizing the hunt, breaking it down into stages, strategizing. This intrinsic human drive to formalize interactions, to impose structure on chaos, is the very bedrock upon which all board games, from the simplest shell and stick layouts to the most complex digital epics, are built. It's almost as if our brains, tired of constantly calculating survival odds, decided, you know what? Let's just make up some rules and pretend we're in charge for a bit. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence for this ancient urge comes from archaeological sites across the globe. We're talking about finds that predate virtually every other form of complex human endeavor. For instance, the infamous Senet boards, dating back to at least 3100 BCE, have been discovered in Egyptian tombs. This isn't some dusty, obscure historical fact. Senet was the game of the pharaohs, so significant that boards and pieces were often interred with the deceased to help them navigate the treacherous journey to the afterlife. Imagine a game so important it literally became your travel buddy for eternity. Kind of puts that argument you had over who gets to be the thimble in Monopoly into perspective, doesn't it? But the mainstream facts only scratch the surface. Here's a quirky tidbit for your sleepy brain. Some of the earliest game boards aren't meticulously carved stone or wood, but simply patterns scratched into the earth itself. Picture a nomadic tribe, perhaps resting after a long trek across the plains of what is now the Middle East. Someone, idly perhaps, traces a series of divots and lines in the dirt with a stick. Others gather round, intrigued. Soon, everyone is contributing, debating, laughing. The pieces might be animal droppings, pebbles, or even dried berries. These ephemeral games, vanishing with the next gust of wind or morning dew, leave no archaeological trace, yet they represent a vibrant, constant stream of play that surely predates any surviving physical artifact. Historians still argue whether these earliest, fleeting forms of play were purely recreational, or if they held deeper ritualistic or even educational purposes. Were they teaching hunting strategies, predicting fortunes, or just a way to pass the time before inventing Netflix? The debate continues, shrouded in the mists of prehistory. You feel the weight of countless generations behind you, all driven by this same inexplicable desire to play. The urge to formalize interaction, to impose arbitrary rules on a chaotic universe, to create miniature worlds of challenge and triumph. It's a fundamental part of what makes us, well, us. You're not just playing a game. You're participating in an unbroken chain of human ingenuity that began when the very first human picked up that very first pebble and thought, what if? What if we assign this pebble a special meaning? What if we make it move across a designated space? What if we win? This isn't just history. It's the quiet hum of an ancient urge, still resonating in every click of a dice and every calculated move you make today. You feel the dry desert air prickle your skin, a fine dust settling on your eyelashes as you stand on the banks of the Nile, the ancient river a ribbon of life winding through endless sand. The sun, a relentless eye in the cerulean sky, beats down, making the very air shimmer above the colossal stone monuments. You watch as laborers, caked in sweat and mud, haul immense blocks, the rhythmic chant of their toil echoing across the valley. It's a harsh world, demanding and unforgiving, where a simple cut could fester into a fatal infection, and a snake bite means a quick, agonizing journey to the Jewett. Honestly, you probably wouldn't survive a week here without modern medicine and a really good air conditioner. But amidst the relentless grind of existence, even in the shadow of eternity, there was always time for a game. And in ancient Egypt, one game transcended mere amusement, becoming a vital, almost sacred, part of the journey through life and into the mysterious beyond. We're talking, of course, about Senet. Imagine, for a moment, a pharaoh, perhaps even the boy King Tutankhamun himself, reclining on an ornate chaise, his fingers tracing the hieroglyphs carved into a beautiful, inlaid wooden board. This wasn't just a pastime for royalty. Senet boards have been discovered in tombs ranging from the humblest to the grandest, suggesting its widespread popularity across all social strata. It's truly a mainstream historical fact that Senet was intimately connected with the afterlife. The game wasn't just played for fun. It was believed to be a symbolic journey through the underworld, a cosmic battle against the forces of chaos, ensuring the player's soul reached the blessed fields of Aru. Each move, each piece advanced, was a step closer to eternal salvation. The board itself is deceptively simple, a grid of 30 squares, arranged in 3 rows of 10. You have 2 sets of pieces, usually 7 of each, though sometimes fewer. One set is conical, the other spool-shaped. Instead of dice, you use casting sticks, often 4 of them, each painted on one side. The number of painted sides landing face up determined your move. Imagine the clatter of these sticks as they hit the ground, the anticipation in the air. The goal, as best we can piece together, was to be the first to move all your pieces off the board. But here's the quirky bit. Some squares had special meanings, often marked with hieroglyphs representing good fortune or peril. For instance, square 27, the House of Re-Autumn or House of the Waters, might force you to move back or even lose a turn, symbolizing a dangerous crossing in the afterlife. It's like a board game designed by an existential philosopher with a penchant for bureaucratic hurdles. Oh, you thought you were almost there? Surprise! Back to the existential waiting room. Now, while we know the general layout and the purpose of the game, here's where the scholarly debate enters the picture. The precise rules of Senet are, frankly, lost to the sands of time. We have fragments of instructions, interpretations of tomb paintings showing people playing, and educated guesses based on similar games. But historians still argue whether the game was purely a race, or if there were strategic elements like capturing opponents' pieces or blocking their path. Was it more like backgammon, with intricate tactical decisions, or a simpler game of pure luck? It's a puzzle with half the pieces missing, and every Egyptologist has their favorite theory. You can almost hear them muttering, No, they absolutely must have allowed capturing on the House of Three Truths," as they sip their lukewarm tea. You can almost feel the weight of spiritual significance with each move. This wasn't just a casual evening activity. It was a rehearsal for eternity. As you move your pieces, you are symbolically navigating the treacherous pathways of the Jewett, encountering friendly deities and monstrous guardians, overcoming obstacles and perhaps even outsmarting the forces of chaos. The final squares on the board were often particularly auspicious, representing the triumph of the soul and its safe arrival in the afterlife. Imagine the relief, the quiet joy, as your last piece exits the board, symbolizing your soul's successful passage to the eternal fields of abundance, free from suffering, where you could literally eat forever. Which, let's be honest, sounds pretty good after a lifetime of hard labor and questionable dental hygiene. The intricate connection between Senet and the afterlife is evident in how it was depicted and buried. In many tombs, complete Senet boards, sometimes beautifully crafted from ebony and ivory, or even less elaborate pottery versions, were placed near the deceased. This wasn't just for entertainment in the afterlife. It was a tool, a ritual object to aid the soul. Some tomb paintings even show the deceased playing against an unseen opponent, presumably a deity or a representation of fate itself. It underscores the profound belief that even in death, the journey continued, and games offered a framework, a ritualized path for that continuation. Consider the implications of a game holding such spiritual weight. It wasn't just about winning or losing in the mortal sense. It was about performing the ritual correctly, demonstrating your knowledge of the path, and ultimately securing your eternal well-being. Think about that for a moment. Your board game skills might actually determine your cosmic fate. No pressure, though. This deep integration of play into religious belief shows just how fundamental games were, not just as entertainment, but as meaningful cultural practices, a bridge between the mundane and the divine. The very act of playing became a form of prayer, a plea for safe passage. It's a testament to the human need to ritualize, to find meaning and order even in the face of the unknown. And who knew a simple board with 30 squares could hold such immense power? It wasn't just a game. It was a spiritual GPS for the afterlife, hopefully with better reception than yours. And so, as the desert night cools and the stars begin to pinpoint the velvet sky, you leave the dusty, sun-baked landscape of ancient Egypt, carrying with you the echo of clattering sticks and the silent prayers of pharaohs. The game of Senet, a tangible link between the living and the dead, whispers of a time when every move had eternal consequences, a gentle reminder that even play can be a profound journey. You feel the dry desert wind whipping across your face, no longer the humid Nile air you were just breathing, but something far more parched. The sun beats down with an intensity that promises mirages, but the city before you is no illusion. It rises from the Mesopotamian plain like a colossal brick-built beast, its ziggurat a stepped mountain of mud bricks reaching for the heavens. This is Ur, a city so ancient, so foundational, that its very name whispers of beginnings. You walk through narrow, sun-baked streets, the scent of baking bread mingling with the dust and something else, something metallic and human, hinting at the vast, complex lives unfolding around you. It's a bit different from guiding souls through the afterlife, isn't it? Here, life itself is the game, and let's be honest, you probably won't survive this era for long without a good pair of sandals and an even better sense of self-preservation. Here, in the cradle of civilization, where writing itself was birthed from the needs of administration and trade, another form of sophisticated expression took hold. The board game. Forget the spiritual journeys of Senet. In Ur, the game was less about the cosmos and more about earthly strategy, a reflection of the intricate social hierarchies and the sharp minds that built these impressive city-states. You step into a sprawling complex, perhaps a royal residence or a wealthy merchant's home, and there, laid out on a low table, is something exquisite. It's not a simple etched slab like some of those early play surfaces we've seen. No, this is craftsmanship. This is the royal game of Ur, or as it's sometimes called, the game of 20 squares. You lean closer, admiring the intricate shell inlay, the lapis lazuli and red limestone adorning the wooden board. It's shaped like two parallel tracks, each with 4 squares, connected by a bridge of 2 squares, and then a final section of 6 squares. It looks a bit like a flattened, abstract dragon, or perhaps a particularly confusing commute route for ancient bureaucrats. The pieces, 7 for each player, are distinctive. Some are plain, others bear 5 dots, all small and easily handled. The dice aren't your typical cubes either. They're pyramidal tetrahedrons, often marked on only 2 corners. You pick one up, the weight surprisingly satisfying in your palm. The rules, thanks to a cuneiform tablet from 177 BC by a scribe named Idi Marduk Bla Macron letter 1E6 DU, who clearly had a lot of time on his hands, bless his methodical heart, are remarkably clear for an ancient game. Your objective is to move all your 7 pieces from your starting point, around the track, and off the board before your opponent does. You roll the dice, and the number of marked corners facing up determines your movement. Landing on a square already occupied by your opponent allows you to capture their piece, sending it back to the start. A delightful bit of ancient trash talking, if you ask me. But there are safe squares, often marked with rosettes, where your pieces are immune from capture. It's a delightful blend of luck and strategy, requiring you to balance aggressive captures with protecting your own precious pieces. It's like chess, but if chess had a slightly more chaotic, dice-rolling cousin who occasionally cheated. This game wasn't just for the elite, though the most beautiful boards, like the ones discovered by Sir Leonard Woolley in the royal tombs of Ur in the 1920s, certainly belonged to them. Think about that for a second. In the 1920s, archaeologists unearthed game boards that were nearly 4,500 years old. That's a mainstream historical fact that still gives me shivers. The humble, unadorned versions of the game have been found etched into brick and stone throughout the Near East, suggesting its widespread popularity across all social strata. It was a game played by kings and commoners alike, a unifying pastime in a world often defined by stark divisions. The quirky tidbit here is those rosette squares. While they offer safety, some interpretations suggest they might have also allowed for an extra roll, or perhaps even had a divinatory aspect, acting as a portal or a lucky charm. It's not just a safe haven, it's a potential springboard. Historians still argue whether the royal game of Ur was purely recreational, or if it held a deeper, more spiritual or divinatory significance, much like Senet. Was it just a way to pass the time, or did the movement of pieces, the throws of the dice, somehow reflect or even influence one's fate? Some scholars posit that the layout of the board itself, with its journey from one side to the other, might symbolize a journey through life, or even the afterlife, even if not as explicitly as Senet. The fact that boards were buried with the dead certainly supports the latter idea. Perhaps, in their final slumber, the deceased could still enjoy a good game, strategizing their way through eternity. Imagine explaining to an ancient Ur resident that your modern games involve staring at a glowing rectangle for hours, manipulating pixels. They'd probably give you a blank look and offer you a piece of dried fish. As you consider the complexities of this ancient pastime, you can almost hear the soft click of dice against stone, the murmuring of players, and the occasional triumphant shout as a piece is sent back to the start. The strategic depth, combined with the unpredictable roll of the dice, made it endlessly replayable. It was the perfect blend of mental exercise and casual fun, a timeless formula that still keeps us glued to our screens or our physical boards today. The Ur game, with its elegant design and accessible mechanics, truly took root in the ancient world, proving that a good game, like a good story, transcends time and culture. It's a game that makes you think, but not so hard that you can't enjoy a quiet moment in the shadow of a colossal ziggurat, imagining the lives of those who played before you. You trace your fingers over the dusty, sun-baked earth, feeling the phantom vibrations of countless feet that have passed this way over millennia. The familiar scent of Nile mud and Euphrates reeds begins to fade from your memory, replaced by the sharper, spicier air of a land far to the east. You've journeyed beyond the established empires, venturing into vast, undulating plains and dense, emerald jungles, where rivers, not unlike the ones you left behind, carve their own paths through ancient civilizations. Imagine the sheer audacity of it, pushing ever further, driven by curiosity, trade, or perhaps just the primal urge to see what lies beyond the horizon. And honestly, if you were doing this without a time machine and a comfortable armchair, you probably wouldn't survive the dysentery, let alone the sheer boredom of walking for months. So you're welcome. As you trek eastward, the whispers of ancient games follow you, echoing not just in the great halls of kings, but in the humble dwellings of villagers in market squares, and even, it seems, in the very dust beneath your feet. Because play, you see, isn't confined by borders or dictated by imperial decree. It's an inherent human impulse, a spontaneous eruption of joy and strategy that travels faster than any merchant caravan. You arrive, virtually speaking, in the sun-drenched plains of the Indus Valley, a civilization as old and mysterious as Egypt, yet with its own unique heartbeat. Here, In cities like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, dating back to 2500 BCE, archaeologists have unearthed intriguing little cubes, some marked with dots, others with symbols. These aren't just random stones. These are dice, remarkably similar in form to those used today, suggesting that the concept of chance, of rolling the bones, was deeply embedded in their daily lives. You can almost hear the soft clatter as they bounced across clay tables, perhaps settling the score on a game of strategy, or maybe just deciding who had to fetch the water from the communal well. Imagine the stakes. A bad roll might mean you had to spend your entire afternoon hauling buckets in the unforgiving heat. The horror. What truly captures your imagination, though, are the fragments of what appear to be game boards and intricate game pieces. In one excavation, they found a rectangular board-like object with grid patterns, alongside finely carved terracotta and stone tokens. While the exact rules of these Indus Valley games remain tantalizingly elusive, their very presence indicates a sophisticated culture with leisure time and a deep appreciation for formalized play. It's not just about survival here. It's about mental engagement, about challenging a friend, or perhaps, as we've seen before, even challenging fate itself. These aren't crude stick-in-the-mud affairs. These are crafted objects, suggesting value and widespread use. Historians still argue whether these early Indus Valley games were purely recreational, or if they held deeper ritualistic or divinatory meanings, much like Senet back in Egypt. It's easy to project our modern understanding of game night onto the past, but the ancients often blurred the lines between play, ritual, and learning. As you venture further, through vast mountain ranges and across shimmering deserts, you begin to see subtle variations in the game designs. In ancient China, you encounter evidence of Liubo, a popular board game that emerged during the Warring States period and thrived for centuries. It was a complex game, often played by two players on a square board with specific markings, using 6 throwing sticks. A bit like dice, but long and flat and unique game pieces that represented different roles. Liubo wasn't just a pastime. It was deeply intertwined with divination, philosophy, and even military strategy. Imagine trying to explain the rules of Liubo to someone who only knew noughts and crosses. Their head would probably explode, and then you'd have to clean it up, which would really ruin the whole sleepy ASMR vibe we've got going. It was a game so significant that it was often buried in tombs with the deceased, clearly intended to accompany them into the afterlife, much like Senet. This consistent theme across vast distances and disparate cultures, the idea of games as companions for the journey beyond, is remarkably profound. And then there's the more obscure, the fringe tidbits that make you tilt your head and wonder. Consider the peculiar stone game boards carved directly into rock outcrops in various remote parts of the world, from ancient Armenian highlands to African plateaus. These aren't elaborate, portable objects. They are permanent fixtures, often found in seemingly isolated locations. Were they markers for travelers, places of ritual, or simply spots where bored shepherds passed the time between dodging wolves and existential dread? Some of these rock-cut boards resemble Mancala-type games, often referred to as sowing games, where seeds or pebbles are moved between depressions. These games are incredibly old and found in a dizzying array of forms across Africa, parts of Asia, and even the Caribbean, suggesting an incredibly ancient and widespread diffusion of a simple, yet deeply strategic concept. It's fascinating how a basic idea, moving counters around a track, can take on 1,000 different forms, each reflecting the ingenuity and cultural nuances of its players. It really makes you think about how many hours were spent hunched over these simple indentations, contemplating the next move, perhaps even sharing a laugh or two, all under the vast, indifferent sky. You step onto the polished, dark wood floor, cool beneath your bare feet, and the scent of aged cedar and faint incense wafts through the air. You're no longer in the dusty, sun-baked plains of Mesopotamia or the sacred tombs of Egypt. Now the air is thick with a different kind of quiet, the focused stillness of ancient China, where shadows play long against paper screens, and the only sounds are the soft rustle of silk robes and the crisp, almost musical click of polished stones. You lean in, mesmerized by a square board, crisscrossed with a grid of 19 lines in each direction. It's simple, stark even, yet within its apparent simplicity lies a universe of complexity. This is the realm of Go, or Waiki as it was known here, the encircling game. Unlike the race to the finish line you witnessed with Senet, or the calculated dash of the royal game of Ur, Go is about territory, about influence, about slow, inexorable envelopment. You watch as a player, an elderly scholar with a wispy beard, places a smooth black stone on an intersection. His opponent, a younger man, thoughtful and intense, counters with a white stone. The objective isn't to capture pieces in a direct assault, but to surround empty areas, to build walls of influence that delineate your domain. Think of it less like a direct skirmish and more like a protracted siege, or perhaps even an elaborate dance of strategic positioning. You quickly realize that if you were to try to master this game in ancient China, going head-to-head with even an amateur, you probably won't survive this intellectual battlefield without a serious headache and a sudden urge for a nap. It's that deep. This isn't just a game. It's a philosophical exercise, a mirror reflecting the principles of balance, harmony, and subtle power that permeate ancient Chinese thought. Historians widely agree that Go, beyond mere recreation, was instrumental in shaping military strategy and political philosophy. Generals honed their tactical thinking on the board, learning about sacrificing a small part to gain a larger advantage, about the importance of territory over individual pieces, and about patient, long-term planning. Legend even whispers that the game was invented by the mythical Emperor Yao, or Shun, to discipline his wayward son, Danju, teaching him concentration, discipline, and strategy. Whether that's true or just a good bedtime story for misbehaving princes, it underscores the perceived educational value of the game. Imagine a game so profound it could teach an emperor's son how not to be a complete royal pain. Good luck with that in the modern world. The quiet intensity of Go contrasts sharply with another game that flickers in and out of the historical record, a game shrouded in far more mystery. Liubo. You turn your gaze to a different table, where another board sits. It's also rectangular, but with distinct markings. A central square, 4 L-shaped pieces, and specific lines that seem to trace pathways. The pieces themselves are intriguing. Some are human-shaped, others represent mythical beasts, and you see 6 throwing sticks or dice, perhaps even a set of knives or swords used for scoring. The air around this game feels different, less about quiet contemplation and more about a bustling energy, perhaps even a hint of playful chaos. Unlike the beautifully preserved Go boards and the clear rules passed down through millennia, the precise rules of Liubo are a subject of ongoing, spirited debate among scholars. We have unearthed boards, pieces, and even some textual references like a passage by the poet Song Yu describing it as swift success. But how exactly it was played, That's where the fun really begins for historians, who still argue whether Liubo was primarily a game of pure chance, a complex strategy game, or perhaps even a ritualistic form of divination. It's like finding a pristine chess set from 2,000 years ago, but only a vague note saying, "Move pieces, win." You'd be scratching your head, wouldn't you? Some theories suggest players raced their pieces around the board, utilizing the throwing sticks for movement, with the goal of capturing opponents or reaching certain points. Other interpretations propose a more complex tactical game with distinct offensive and defensive maneuvers. It clearly involved some element of chance from the throwing sticks, but also skill in moving the pieces. What we do know is that Liubo was incredibly popular. It was played by kings and commoners alike, evidence found in tombs and across various social strata. Illustrations depict emperors playing it, and even more tellingly, you find miniature Liubo sets among funerary goods, suggesting its importance in the afterlife, much like your old friend Senet. Remember how the Egyptians thought Senet could guide souls. Perhaps the Chinese believed Liubo could bring good fortune or provide entertainment in the next world. It was a game associated with leisure, with social gatherings, and possibly with gambling, lending a certain unpredictable excitement to the otherwise highly ordered lives of the Han Dynasty elite. It offered a thrilling counterpoint to the cerebral calm of Go, a chance for a quick thrill rather than a long, drawn-out intellectual battle. So, as you watch these games unfold, you start to grasp the duality of ancient Chinese thought reflected in their pastimes. On one hand, the deep philosophical strategy of Go, a game that mirrored the grand chessboard of warfare and governance. On the other, the mysterious, lively Liubo, a game perhaps more aligned with the rhythms of chance, entertainment, and even spiritual interaction. Both, in their own unique ways, offered pathways to understanding the world, to finding order within chaos, and to simply, delightfully playing a game. You feel the warm Mediterranean sun on your face, the scent of olives and dry earth lingering in the air. This isn't the hushed, incense-laden chamber of an Egyptian temple, nor the opulent, bustling court of Mesopotamia. No, you're in ancient Greece, perhaps amidst the bustling agora of Athens, or seated on a simple stone bench within the stoa of a philosophical school. The air here hums not with the drone of sacred chants or the clatter of ceremonial dice, but with the sharp, invigorating crackle of debate, the murmur of intellectual discourse. You watch as two figures, cloaked in simple chitons, lean intently over a board etched into the stone, or perhaps drawn in the dust. Their faces are etched with concentration, not the reverence you saw in the players of Senet, nor the competitive fervor of Ur. This is something different, something clinical, logical. This is the world of Paideia, the board game in its purest Greek sense, and it's about to rewire your brain for better or worse. Gone are the mystical journeys of the afterlife, the appeals to divine favor, the theatrical throes of astragalite. Here, the gods are not invoked, only reason is. Paideia is an abstract strategy game, often described as a precursor to checkers or even chess, though its exact rules remain a delightful mystery, like trying to reconstruct a gourmet meal from a single crumb. But what we do know, what truly sets it apart, is its uncompromising emphasis on pure logic and calculation. No pharaoh's soul hinges on this move, no king's legacy cemented by a lucky roll. This game is played with the mind for the mind. It's an exercise in pure thought, a mental gymnasium. You might find yourself wishing for the simpler days of chasing a wooden ball honestly. This wasn't just a casual pastime. It was an integral part of the intellectual landscape. The Greeks, renowned for their philosophy, mathematics, and strategic military thinking, saw Paideia as a tool, not just for amusement, but for the rigorous training of the intellect. It was used in philosophical discussions, much like a debate prompt, to illustrate logical principles or test strategic acumen. It even found its way into military training, helping young commanders hone their ability to foresee consequences and plan multiple steps ahead. Plato himself, that giant of Western thought, often discussed the importance of such games, seeing them as vital for developing mathematical understanding and strategic foresight in young citizens. It was, in his view, a form of intellectual calisthenics, strengthening the very sinews of reason. And let's be honest, in this intellectual arena, if your logic falters, you probably won't survive this conversation with your ego intact. The ancient Greeks didn't pull their punches, especially not intellectually. They took their logic so seriously, you'd think the fate of the cosmos hinged on moving a single pebble. The game typically involved two players, each with a set of identical pieces, often pebbles or small counters. The board was a grid of squares or lines, and the objective was generally to immobilize or capture your opponent's pieces by flanking them or surrounding them. Imagine a system where every move is a mathematical proposition, every placement a theorem. There's no element of chance here, no hidden information, just the stark, beautiful, sometimes brutal, elegance of the human mind calculating possibilities. One quirky tidbit about Paideia, or at least the general category of board games the Greeks played, is the concept of a kill or capture, often being referred to simply as eating the opponent's piece. So you weren't just taking a piece. You were conceptually devouring your opponent's strategic presence on the board. Trying to grasp all the possibilities and countermoves would make your brain feel like it just ran a marathon. A very, very strategic marathon. Historians still argue whether Paideia's exact rules, or even its precise board layout, were standardized across all Greek city-states, or if variations existed, making it less a single game and more a family of similar logical challenges. Was there a Pan-Hellenic Paideia, or did each polis have its own flavor of abstract strategy? The answers are lost to time, but the underlying principle of pure, unadulterated thought remains. Remember Go with its vast, complex strategic landscape, or the royal game of Ur with its blend of luck and strategy, where a divine roll could alter your fate. Paideia strips away the dice, strips away the divine, strips away the narrative of the journey or the kingly contest. It leaves only the stark, elegant, and sometimes brutal challenge of two minds locked in a purely logical duel. Here, victory isn't about appeasing the gods or having a lucky day. It's about superior foresight, unassailable logic, and the sheer power of your intellect. You begin to understand how these abstract battles, fought with pebbles on a grid, laid the groundwork for entire systems of formal logic and geometry, influencing thinkers for millennia to come. Roman Empire, legions, ludus, leisure. March with Roman soldiers and citizens, their lives intertwined with boards. You've navigated the intellectual labyrinths of Greek strategy, where abstract thought and philosophical discourse elevated mere pastime into mental gymnastics. Now brace yourself. The air shifts. The scent of olive oil and garlic is replaced by sweat, stale wine, and the faint, metallic tang of iron. The polite debates of the academy give way to the pragmatic, often brutal realities of an empire built on conquest and an iron fist. You stand on the cobblestone streets of Rome, or perhaps within the dusty confines of a legionary camp on the frontier, and the sheer scale of it all is overwhelming. Chariots rumble past, their wheels grinding against the stones. Merchants hawk their wares in booming voices, and everywhere the distinctive clang of hammers shaping metal echoes from blacksmiths' shops. Even amidst this bustling, ordered chaos, one thing becomes strikingly clear. The Romans, despite their reputation for stoicism and discipline, love their games. Not just for intellectual exercise, mind you, but for training, for diversion, for the sheer thrill of it. You might be standing guard on a windswept fort, the cold seeping into your worn leather boots, or perhaps you're a citizen enjoying the warmth of a public bathhouse, the steam rising around you like a soft cloud. But no matter where you are, from the opulent villas of the patricians to the cramped insulae of the plebs, from the dust-choked roads where legions march to the smoky taverns echoing with laughter and the clatter of dice, games are a constant, unassuming presence. They're woven into the very fabric of Roman life, as ubiquitous as aqueducts or bureaucratic decrees. In fact, if you happen to be a legionary, tramping through some godforsaken muddy bog near the Rhine, keep your wits about you. Because while you might be thinking about your next game of ludus latrunculorum to pass the time, a Germanic ambush could turn your thoughts to an entirely different kind of board game, one where you are the piece that probably won't survive the next move. Just a friendly, ancient world reality check for your evening relaxation. But let's get back to the less fatal, more strategic diversions. The Romans, practical people that they were, had a game that perfectly encapsulated their military might and strategic brilliance. Ludus latrunculorum. Imagine a grid-based board, often with 8 or 12 rows and columns, where pieces are distinguished by color, yours versus theirs. It's often referred to as the game of soldiers or the game of brigands, a tactical battle on a miniature scale. Your goal, to capture your opponent's pieces by sandwiching them between two of your own, horizontally or vertically. Think of it as a much older, more aggressive version of reversi, but with a palpable sense of battlefield strategy. You move your pieces, trying to outmaneuver the enemy, setting traps, creating strong defensive lines, and launching swift attacks. Mainstream historical fact. Ludus latrunculorum was widely played by Roman soldiers, not just for entertainment, but as a practical exercise in strategic thinking, troop deployment, and tactical foresight. It honed their minds for the real battles they faced. A kind of ancient military simulator, except without the fancy graphics or the ability to rage quit after a bad defeat. You just had to accept your imaginary legion's demise and try again. Then there's the more relaxed, yet equally popular tabula. If latrunculorum was chess's rough-and-tumble cousin, tabula was definitely backgammon's Roman ancestor. It's a dice game, played on a board typically with 24 points, though variations existed. You roll the dice, and your pieces race around the board, aiming to bear them off before your opponent. It's fast-paced, relies on a mix of strategy and luck, and was absolutely perfect for unwinding after a long day of empire building, or, just trying to survive another Tuesday. You'd find tabula boards everywhere, etched into the marble tables of taverns, scribbled onto the floor tiles of bathhouses, or carefully crafted on portable wooden sets for travel. It was a social game, often accompanied by lively conversation, the clatter of dice, and probably a few too many cups of watered-down wine. You could gamble on tabula, and many did, from the lowliest laborer trying to win enough for his next meal to the senator hoping to recoup his losses from a bad chariot race bet. It certainly added an extra layer of excitement to the evening. Now for a quirky tidbit that reveals just how deeply ingrained games were. You'd often find game boards, especially for tabula or similar race games, scratched directly into the steps of public buildings, the floors of markets, or the waiting areas of bathhouses. Imagine sitting down, perhaps waiting for your toga to be cleaned, a truly Herculean task, I'm told, and simply reaching down to play a quick round on a board that's been there for decades, worn smooth by countless hands and countless games. It speaks to a spontaneous, organic relationship with play, where the environment itself became the game board, ready for action at a moment's notice. It's like finding a tic-tac-toe grid carved into a park bench, but on a grand, imperial scale. However, despite the abundance of evidence, historians still argue whether these games were primarily for entertainment, for developing strategic thinking, or as a form of social bonding that transcended class boundaries. Was Latrunculorum truly a training tool, or just a fun way for soldiers to pass the time between battles? Did tabula genuinely reflect Roman attitudes towards fate and fortune? Or was it just a good excuse to have a drink and gamble away your denarii? The truth, as always, is probably a delightful blend of all three. From the grandest Roman villas to the cramped, multi-story apartment buildings known as insulae, board games were a part of daily life. Wealthy Romans might own exquisite sets made from ivory, glass, or precious metals, their pieces painstakingly carved into intricate designs. You could imagine them, reclining on couches, attended by slaves, debating their next move over a game of Latrunculorum, perhaps with a live-in philosopher offering unsolicited strategic advice. The poorer Romans, however, were just as keen. They'd play with simple pebbles for pieces on boards scratched into the dirt or on cheap wooden tablets. The materials might differ, but the joy of the game, the thrill of competition, and the escape it offered were universal. Bathhouses, those bustling hubs of Roman social life, were practically game dens, filled with the murmur of conversation, the splashes of water, and the constant clatter of gaming pieces. It was a place for gossip, networking, and, of course, countless rounds of tabula. Even children would play simplified versions, learning the rudiments of strategy and chance from a young age. So, whether you were a seasoned legionary strategizing your next campaign on a board, a gambler trying to win big at the taverna, or just a Roman citizen passing the time in the baths, games were your constant companions. They offered a mental escape from the everyday grind of empire, a social lubricant that brought people together, and a surprisingly enduring legacy that echoes through the games we play today. They truly were the universal language of leisure, a silent dialogue across the wooden squares and marked lines, a testament to humanity's enduring need to play, to compete, and to challenge the mind, even if you're just trying to avoid being ambushed by barbarians. Mancala's Reach, African counting games. You stand on the sun-baked earth, the air thick with the scent of dust and distant cooking fires. Overhead, the relentless African sun beats down, casting sharp, dancing shadows as a lone acacia tree offers a meager respite. You feel the grit of the soil beneath your bare feet, and a bead of sweat, despite your best efforts, trickles down your temple, tickling just above your eyebrow. Around you, the rhythmic hum of daily life provides a constant backdrop. The lowing of cattle, the chatter of voices, the distant pounding of grain. It's a world utterly alien to the one you know, a world where the concept of a cold drink is a futuristic fantasy, and frankly, you probably wouldn't last a day without modern conveniences. Yet amidst this ancient reality, a familiar pattern emerges. Your gaze falls upon a group gathered under the shade of a thatched roof. Their faces, etched with the wisdom of generations, are focused intently on a simple wooden board, or perhaps just a series of scooped-out hollows in the very earth beneath them. Small, polished stones or dried seeds are being deftly moved from one depression to another, a mesmerizing dance of fingers and strategy. This, my friend, is Mancala, or rather, one of its countless iterations, a game that transcends mere entertainment to become a fundamental thread in the vast, intricate tapestry of African life. You watch as a young woman, her concentration absolute, scoops up a handful of seeds from a pit, her eyes already calculating the optimal distribution. Her opponent, an elder with a twinkle in his eye, leans forward, ready to counter. There's a quiet intensity, a gentle rhythm to their play that speaks of centuries of practice. Unlike the rigid, often confrontational strategy you might associate with, say, chess, Mancala carries an almost organic flow. It's a game of growth, of sowing and reaping, of nurturing your resources while deftly depriving your opponent of theirs. You can almost feel the pulse of the earth through the game itself. The sheer adaptability of Mancala is its superpower, allowing it to take root and flourish across a continent as vast and diverse as Africa. From the dry savannas to the lush rainforests, from the bustling trade routes to isolated villages, this game spread like wildfire, a testament to its compelling simplicity and profound depth. Its core mechanics of distributing seeds into pits and capturing them based on precise counts remained consistent, yet the variations, oh, the variations. You might encounter a board with 2 rows of pits, common in West Africa, or perhaps 4 rows, as seen in parts of East Africa. The number of seeds per pit, the rules for capturing, even the direction of play. All these elements morphed and adapted, reflecting local customs, available materials, and even regional intellectual traditions. It's like a beloved family recipe that everyone makes slightly differently, but it's always delicious. Consider the Oer variant, particularly popular in West Africa and among the Akan people. Here, the objective is typically to capture more than half of the opponent's seeds. The game often serves as a practical tool for teaching mathematics and strategic thinking to children, subtly preparing them for the complexities of daily life, like figuring out how many goats you need to trade for that really nice piece of pottery, or travel further south, and you might encounter versions where players manage multiple rows, adding layers of complexity to the already intricate calculations. It's not just about counting. It's about foresight, pattern recognition, and adapting to an ever-changing board state. You can almost hear the soft click-clack of the seeds as players ponder their next move, the air thick with unspoken equations. Historians still argue whether Mancala originated in a single location and spread outwards, or if similar counting games developed independently in various parts of Africa. The archaeological evidence can be tricky, given that many early game boards were simply holes dug in the ground or carved into soft stone that might not survive the ravages of time. However, the earliest known Mancala-like boards have been found in the Aksumite kingdom of Ethiopia, dating back to the 6th or 7th century AD. This particular discovery shows grooves carved into large stone slabs, suggesting public play or perhaps a designated area for leisure within a community. Imagine the scene. Ancient Ethiopians taking a break from their bustling trade and monumental building projects, gathering to sow and capture seeds under the shade of an enormous tree. Sounds rather idyllic, doesn't it? Though knowing ancient history, someone probably lost and threw a tantrum. Beyond mere entertainment, Mancala often played a significant social role. In some cultures, it was used for divination, the patterns of the seeds supposedly revealing insights into future events or the will of the gods. You can almost picture a village elder, their eyes fixed on the scattered seeds, interpreting their arrangement with gravitas, like reading tea leaves, but with more math involved. It was also a powerful tool for social bonding, bridging age gaps and fostering community ties. Imagine elders teaching youngsters, the rhythmic movement of seeds becoming a shared language across generations. It's a quiet, profound form of oral tradition, where wisdom is passed down not through spoken words alone, but through the silent choreography of strategy. Even the materials used for the game boards themselves tell a story. While elaborate carved wooden boards are exquisite examples of craftsmanship, many games were played with simple holes scooped into the earth, using pebbles, cowrie shells, or even dried animal droppings as seeds. This raw, organic simplicity underscores its universal appeal and accessibility. You didn't need fancy equipment. You just needed a patch of ground and something to count with. It's the ultimate zero-carbon footprint game, long before anyone even knew what a carbon footprint was. You can sense the ancient rhythms of life woven into the very fabric of Mancala. The collection of seeds, the careful distribution, the strategic capture. It mirrors the agricultural cycles of planting, nurturing, and harvesting. It's a game that reinforces the values of resource management, patience, and community. The quiet concentration on the faces of the players speaks volumes about the intellectual engagement it demands. A subtle, intricate mental workout performed with grace and tradition. From the bustling market square to the quiet family compound, Mancala's ubiquitous presence serves as a gentle reminder that some of the most profound human experiences can emerge from the simplest of actions. Picking up a seed, moving it with intention, and watching where it lands. You drift now, across oceans and millennia, leaving the vast plains of Africa and the intricate patterns of Mancala behind. The air around you shifts, becoming humid and thick with the scent of unfamiliar blossoms and damp earth. You find yourself standing not on paved Roman roads, nor amidst the bustling markets of Ur, but beneath a canopy of dense jungle, the cries of exotic birds echoing through the trees. The sun, a fierce, golden disk, filters through the emerald leaves, dappling the ground in shifting patterns of light and shadow. Here, in the heart of Mesoamerica, ancient civilizations carved their empires from stone and spirit, and their games, like everything else, were steeped in profound meaning. You are witnessing a vibrant scene unfold. Perhaps you're in the bustling heart of Tenochtitlan, the Aztec capital, where merchants hawk their wares and priests ascend the towering pyramids. Or maybe you're in a tranquil Maya city, nestled deep within the rainforest, where knowledge of the cosmos was paramount. Regardless of the exact locale, the air crackles with a familiar energy, the tension of a game about to begin. But this isn't just a casual pastime. This is Patali, the board game that dominated the pre-Columbian Americas, a cross-shaped destiny woven from beans and fate. Imagine the board laid out before you. It's often a simple mat or a carved slab of stone, shaped like a cross with 52 squares. Around its edges, a ring of small, circular depressions or squares forming the path. The pieces, typically 5 for each player, are modest. Colorful pebbles, corn kernels, or perhaps specially carved tokens. But the most intriguing aspect, what truly drives the game, isn't a die. Oh no, that would be far too conventional. Here, you're tossing 5 specially marked beans, split down the middle onto the playing surface. Each bean, when it lands, shows either its flat, unmarked side or its convex, marked side. The count of marked sides determines your move. A single marked bean means 1 step, 2 steps, and so on. If all 5 land marked, you move 10 spaces. If none are marked, you get a 0 and you don't move at all. It's a system that feels both entirely random and utterly cosmic. This isn't just about moving tokens, it's about reading the will of the gods. Patali, derived from the Nahuatl word patalistly, meaning game of beans, was more than mere entertainment. It was a form of divination, a ritual, and often a high-stakes gamble. You watch as players, from commoners in their courtyards to emperors in their palaces, throw the beans with an almost reverent intensity. The game mirrors the cyclical nature of their cosmos, the journey of the sun, or perhaps even the path of a soul through the underworld. Mainstream historical fact time. Patali was so deeply embedded in the social and religious fabric of Mesoamerican societies, including the Aztec, Maya, Zapotec, and Teotihuacan cultures, that it often formed part of significant festivals and ceremonies, with specific rituals performed before play. The stakes, oh, they could be astronomical. You could bet your precious feathered cloaks, your stores of cacao beans, your land, or even your very freedom. Some players, in desperate attempts to win back their losses, would even wager their own family members into slavery. That's where the cheeky reality check comes in. If you were playing Patali with some of these ancient high rollers, you probably wouldn't survive this financially, or perhaps even physically, if you lost too much. It puts that occasional all-in moment in your modern poker game into rather stark perspective, doesn't it? Just imagine explaining to your family, "Yeah, so I lost the house, our car, and little Timmy on a bad bean toss. But hey, it was for the gods." A quirky tidbit surfaces as you observe. Sometimes, to ensure the outcome was truly divinely ordained, players would fast or offer blood sacrifices before a particularly important game. It's not exactly bringing your lucky socks to bingo, is it? The board itself, regardless of its material, was often considered sacred, sometimes even imbued with protective or divinatory powers. Historians still argue whether Patali originated with one specific culture and then spread, or if similar cross-shaped games developed independently across different Mesoamerican societies. The exact symbolism of each square, and whether different regions held entirely different interpretations of the game's cosmic journey, remains a fascinating subject of scholarly debate. You notice the intense concentration on the players' faces, the subtle shifts in their posture with each bean toss. Their destinies in that moment are tied to the whims of chance and the perceived favor of unseen deities. The game isn't just a representation of life's unpredictable path. It's an active engagement with it. It's a testament to how profoundly integrated play was into every aspect of these ancient lives, from the mundane to the divine. The dust of the Patali court settles, the last breathless gasp of a losing player still hanging in the humid air, and then a new sound emerges, sharp and decisive. The clatter of a tumble, the distinct click of something small and hard against stone. Your gaze shifts from the sprawling board games of the New World to something far older, far more primal, yet infinitely more potent. The dice. You cup your hand, feeling the surprising weight of a piece of carved knuckle bone and a astragalus, perhaps from a sheep or goat. It's not perfectly symmetrical, far from it. Each organic curve presents a different possibility when it tumbles from your palm onto the rough earth. This isn't just about moving tokens on a board. This is about the primal thrill of surrendering to chance, about asking the cosmos for a sign, or simply just trying to win that last bit of grain for dinner. This tiny, unassuming object, whether a polished cube or an ancient bone, holds the power to twist fortunes, to rewrite destinies with a single, unceremonious roll. The very first dice weren't designed, they were discovered. Those animal knuckle bones were naturally suited for random outcomes. They have 4 distinct sides on which they can easily land, and people quickly noticed. Imagine the earliest humans, sitting around a fire, tossing these bones, not necessarily for a game as we understand it, but perhaps to consult the spirits, to divine the success of a hunt, or to determine who got the bigger share of the evening's meager meal. It's a remarkably humble beginning for something that would eventually underpin entire industries and even complex philosophical discussions. As civilizations blossomed, so too did the sophistication of these fortune-tellers and gay menders. You see them everywhere, from the meticulously arranged tombs of Egyptian pharaohs to the bustling marketplaces of ancient Rome. While Senet used its throwing sticks to dictate movement, and the royal game of Ur had its pyramidal dice, the true multi-sided die, the predecessor to the one you might roll in a modern board game, truly began to take shape. These weren't just found objects anymore. They were crafted, meticulously carved from bone, ivory, wood, stone, even precious metals. Imagine the skill involved in sanding and shaping a perfect cube from a piece of bone, then painstakingly engraving the pips, those little dots that signify numbers, onto each face. It's an art form in itself, really. And speaking of pips, here's a quirky little tidbit for your sleepy brain. While most modern 6-sided dice show opposite faces summing to 7, like 1 opposite 6, 2 opposite 5, 3 opposite 4, ancient Roman dice often didn't follow this convention. Some had sequential numbers, others seemingly random arrangements. It makes you wonder how many ancient Roman gamblers squinted at their dice, trying to mentally rearrange the numbers to convince themselves they weren't getting cheated. You might laugh, but the impulse to rig the game is, apparently, as old as the game itself. Archaeologists have unearthed ancient loaded dice, weighted on one side, from sites all across the classical world. It seems that while humanity was busy inventing writing and cities, they were also perfecting the art of the subtle cheat. Some things truly never change, do they? You'd think with all that grand philosophy and engineering, they'd have moved past such petty deceptions, but no. The function of these early dice wasn't purely for entertainment, either. For centuries, dice served as potent tools for divination. Picture a priestess in ancient Greece, casting a handful of astragali, interpreting the pattern they form, and declaring the will of the gods. Or a Roman general, before a critical battle, rolling a set of dice to gauge divine favor, probably muttering a quick prayer for a good outcome because, let's be honest, you probably won't survive this if the omens are bad. This intertwining of chance, fate, and the divine is a constant thread through ancient history, far more prevalent than just a simple roll for who gets to start first. Historians still argue whether the primary purpose of early dice was truly for sacred divination, or if games of pure chance emerged concurrently, purely for amusement and gambling, with the sacred aspect being a later addition or a separate evolution. It's a chicken-and-egg question, really, but one that highlights the profound role these tiny objects played. As games evolved, from the simple racing mechanics of Senet to the strategic depth of Paideia, dice remain the unpredictable element, the great equalizer, or, depending on your luck, the great destroyer of dreams. You might have carefully planned your moves on the board, outmaneuvered your opponent with cunning strategy, only to have the fickle roll of the dice shatter your well-laid plans. It's like preparing a gourmet meal, perfectly seasoning everything, only for your oven to decide it's going to cook everything at half temperature for twice as long. Frustrating, right? The Romans, in particular, were obsessed with dicing. The term alia iacta est, the die is cast, famously attributed to Caesar, perfectly encapsulates their view of these small cubes as instruments of irrevocable fate. Gambling dens were ubiquitous in Roman cities, bustling with citizens from all walks of life. Imagine the smoky taverns, the clatter of dice on wooden tables, the shouts of triumph and groans of despair. It was a social glue, a way to pass the time, and a dangerously addictive pursuit. You could lose everything on a single throw, your coin, your clothes, even your freedom. It makes you appreciate that modern gambling apps at least come with a self-exclusion option. Imagine trying to explain that to a Roman legionary who just lost his month's pay on a bad roll. Even beyond the Mediterranean, the influence of dice permeated cultures. In ancient India, the Mahabharata epic features a famous dice game that leads to devastating consequences, showcasing the extreme power attributed to these rolls. Whether they were made of polished seeds, marked stones, or intricately carved bone, dice were universal symbols of chance, fairness, or unfairness, and the thrill of the unknown. They democratized fate, allowing anyone, regardless of status, to participate in its unpredictable dance. You didn't need to be a king to roll a natural 6. You just needed the dice. And a little bit of nerve, maybe. So, as you drift deeper into this narrative, think of the humble die not just as a random number generator, but as a silent chronicler of human desires. The yearning for control, the thrill of risk, the fear of losing everything. It's a tiny, powerful artifact, linking us directly to the ancient world, proving that some things, like the urge to roll the dice and see what happens, are just fundamentally human. The clatter of those ancient bones echoes through millennia, a testament to the enduring appeal of chance and the timeless quest for fortune, one roll at a time. Game boards, canvas of ancient worlds. You can almost feel the cool, smooth, polished surface beneath your fingertips, can't you? Imagine the scent of ancient cedar or the faint, earthy aroma of sun-baked clay as you lean closer, tracing the worn lines of a game board laid out before you. These weren't just flat surfaces. They were stories, maps of worlds both real and imagined, etched and painted by hands long turned to dust. And honestly, considering some of the materials involved, you probably won't survive the journey to acquire a pristine example yourself. Think about hauling massive stone slabs across deserts, or bartering for exotic animal tusks in places where the local wildlife considers you a very slow-moving snack. Good times. You see, while we've talked about the games themselves, the frantic dash of Senet pieces towards the afterlife, the strategic dance across the royal Ur board, or the contemplative moves of go the stages for these grand performances are just as fascinating. Forget your mass-produced cardboard and plastic. In the ancient world, a game board was often a statement, a piece of art, or a meticulously crafted tool that spoke volumes about its owner and the society that birthed it. From the earliest days, necessity truly was the mother of invention, or at least, the mother of convenient game surfaces. The very first boards were likely nothing more elaborate than lines scratched into the dirt or sand, perhaps with pebbles or seeds serving as pieces. simple, ephemeral, and perfect for a quick match under the desert sun. But as societies grew more complex, so did their leisure activities and the dedication to their paraphernalia. Take ancient Egypt, for instance. We've already seen how pivotal Senet was, this spiritual journey across squares. Their boards weren't always humble. While some were carved from plain wood, often sycamore, fig, or acacia, others were exquisite works of art. You find examples crafted from rich ebony, inlaid with ivory, faience, or even precious metals like gold. Imagine a Senet board gleaming under the torchlight in a pharaoh's tomb, each square a tiny, polished window into the netherworld. The craftsmanship was astounding. Tiny, precise cuts, pieces of contrasting materials fitted together with a level of accuracy that would make a modern carpenter weep with envy. A mainstream historical fact here is that many Senet boards were indeed found in tombs, underscoring their importance in the afterlife journey, with some even bearing inscriptions of prayers or blessings, demonstrating their ritualistic significance. Then you skip over to Mesopotamia and the royal game of Ur. Here, boards were often made from wood, yes, but those found in royal tombs, like the famed examples from Ur itself, tell a different story. These weren't just simple planks. They were intricate wooden boxes, often hollow, with the playing grid created by painstakingly inlaying shell, lapis lazuli, and red limestone. Picture the striking contrast of deep blue lapis against the pearly white shell, all set within a rich wooden frame. The precision required to cut and fit these tiny tesserae was immense, a testament to the skill of Sumerian artisans. It wasn't just about sticking pretty stones on wood. It was about creating a durable, beautiful surface that could withstand countless games of strategy. Beyond these grand, royal pieces, more utilitarian boards abounded. In Rome, for example, the tabula lusoria, the general term for gaming boards, could be incredibly diverse. You'd find them scratched into the floors of public buildings, on the steps of temples, or even on the tops of sarcophagi. These weren't for carrying around, obviously, but for impromptu games wherever a flat surface presented itself. A quirky tidbit. Some Roman legionaries are thought to have carried small, foldable leather or cloth boards with them on campaigns, etched with simple grids, allowing them to play games like ludus latrunculorum, a game somewhat akin to checkers, even on the move. Imagine setting up a quick match on your shield after a long march, or on an overturned bucket. Resourceful, right? But it wasn't always about the grand materials. Consider the widespread game of Mancala. Its boards across Africa and parts of Asia display an incredible range of adaptability. Some are carved directly into rock outcrops, enduring for centuries. Others are elaborate wooden creations, sometimes with animal motifs or intricate geometric patterns, passed down through generations. Still others are simply rows of holes scooped into the sand, or dug into a piece of soft earth, using seeds or pebbles as counters. The genius of Mancala isn't just in its gameplay, but in its ability to manifest on almost any available surface, turning the very ground you stand on into a playground. The materials also tell a story of access and status. While a humble shepherd might scratch a 9-holes board onto a flat stone, a wealthy merchant might commission one made of polished marble, perhaps with silver or gold inlays. Ivory, a notoriously difficult material to work with due to its hardness and tendency to split, was highly prized for its smooth texture and elegant appearance. Bone, a more common and accessible material, was often used for smaller boards or individual game pieces, sometimes intricately carved. Historians still argue whether certain patterns or decorative elements on game boards were purely aesthetic, or if they held deeper, symbolic meanings, perhaps related to cosmology, social hierarchy, or even magical protection. Was that spiraling design on a Bronze Age board just a cool pattern? Or was it a miniature labyrinth meant to trap evil spirits or guide the players? We might never know for sure, but the questions themselves add another layer of intrigue to these ancient artifacts. The act of making these boards was an art in itself. Picture the carpenter carefully selecting a piece of wood, perhaps drying it for years to prevent warping. Then the steady hand with a chisel incising lines for the grid, or the artisan patiently grinding lapis lazuli into tiny, uniform tesserae, each piece placed with tweezers. Even the dyes used for painting some boards, derived from minerals, plants, or insects, required knowledge and skill. It wasn't just about making a game. It was about creating an experience, a tactile connection to the game's essence. These boards weren't just passive canvases. They were active participants, their textures, colors, and craftsmanship contributing to the entire immersive act of play. They were the silent witnesses to countless victories and defeats, moments of quiet contemplation and boisterous celebration. They are, in essence, the very stage on which the drama of human ingenuity and social interaction played out, echoing through the millennia. You've just marveled at the canvases, the ancient boards upon which strategies unfolded, but now your gaze shifts. It settles on the actors themselves, the silent, stoic pawns and pieces that brought those painted worlds to life. Imagine the cool, smooth weight of a polished obsidian disc in your palm, or the surprising lightness of a sun-baked clay cone, perhaps even the intricate, almost unsettling detail of a carved ivory lion. Each one a microcosm of its era, whispering tales of belief, power, and the sheer human ingenuity poured into something as seemingly simple as a game marker. These weren't just tokens. They were potent symbols. In Egypt, those mummiform pieces from Senet weren't merely your guy on the board. They were representations of the deceased, navigating the perilous path to the afterlife. Each move, a step closer to eternal bliss or perhaps a cosmic reset. It's enough to make you reconsider your aggressive play style in Monopoly, isn't it? Knowing you're not just bankrupting Uncle Bari, you might be metaphorically dooming his soul to wander the Jewat forever. Then you have the dazzling array from Mesopotamia's royal game of Ur. Those distinctive shell inlay pieces, often adorned with 5 dots, were they purely decorative, or did they hold numerological significance? Was each dot a prayer, a wish for fortune, or simply a convenient way to distinguish them from the other players' pieces? You can almost hear the ancient Mesopotamian equivalent of, "Is this one yours or mine?" They look identical from this angle, echoing through the millennia. The materials themselves tell a story of access and ambition. For the common person, a handful of smooth river stones, dried beans, or carved bits of wood would suffice for a game of Mancala, echoing the simplicity and organic connection to the earth that defined so much of ancient life. A mainstream historical fact often overlooked is just how truly accessible many ancient games were, requiring only what nature provided. But ascend the social ladder, and suddenly your pieces are crafted from obsidian, polished jade, or even glittering gold, like those found in royal tombs. Imagine misplacing one of those during a heated game. It's like losing your car keys if your car keys were also priceless ancient artifacts, and you probably won't survive this if you can't find it. The design varied wildly, from the stark, elegant simplicity of ghost stones, those perfectly smooth black and white pebbles embodying the cosmic duality of yin and yang. Or at least, that's how they came to be interpreted, to the more figurative pieces of games like Liubo, where dragon-like figures might have represented celestial powers. Historians still argue whether the initial design of some highly abstract pieces, like certain early Pedaya counters, was primarily driven by practical manufacturing ease, or if their minimalist forms held profound, unwritten philosophical meanings, perhaps understood only by the intellectual elite who first adopted them. You see pieces that are clearly meant to be specific things, a lion, an ox, a warrior. But then you encounter others that are just shapes. A pyramid, a cone, a disc. Were they just placeholders, or did these geometric forms themselves carry a weight of meaning we're now too far removed to grasp? It's like looking at modern art and trying to figure out if it's a profound commentary on the human condition or just a very expensive smudge. The answer, of course, is usually both. Consider the sheer human effort. Every chip, every curve, every polish mark on a piece carved from bone or stone represents hours of meticulous labor. Picture the artisan, hunched over a workbench, perhaps in a dusty Egyptian workshop, carefully shaping a tiny ivory pharaoh or drilling precise holes into a piece of lapis lazuli to create an eye for a lion-headed Ur piece. Think of the tools, simple chisels of bronze or flint, abrasive sands for polishing, and perhaps even early drills powered by bows. The creation of even a single intricate piece was an investment of skill, time, and precious resources. These weren't mass-produced plastic miniatures you find in a modern game box. Each one had a story, a maker, and often a spiritual connection. From the smooth, almost tactile perfection of Chinese go stones, polished to a high sheen, to the roughly hewn yet sturdy wooden pieces used for African Mancala games, a testament to efficiency and natural resourcefulness. Even humble clay, baked hard, could be molded into fascinating shapes, like the conical pieces sometimes associated with Mesopotamian games, offering a sturdy, affordable, and readily available option. The very act of collecting and curating these pieces must have been an art form in itself. Imagine a wealthy Roman patron, not just owning a set of exquisite bronze game pieces, but perhaps even commissioning unique designs that reflected his family's lineage or military triumphs. It's the ancient equivalent of customizing your gaming rig with RGB lights and a bespoke water cooling system, purely for aesthetic and bragging rights, of course. And think about the journey some of these pieces undertook. Ivory from distant lands, exotic wood from far-off forests, precious stones mined deep within the earth. Their presence in a game set speaks volumes about ancient trade routes and global connections. A humble pebble, yes, but a beautifully carved elephant tusk piece from Ur or Egypt might have traveled across deserts and seas. A testament to the interconnectedness of these ancient worlds we've been exploring. Each piece, then, a tiny, silent traveler, carrying not just game strategy, but the very essence of its origin, its journey, and the cultural beliefs it embodied. Even something as seemingly simple as a dice. Remember those from our last chat? They transformed from crude knuckle bones into intricately carved, multi-sided objects, each face holding a specific symbol or number. The very act of throwing them, relinquishing control to fate, imbued them with a power far beyond their material form. They weren't just randomizers. They were conduits to the divine, tools for divination as much as for entertainment. The difference between a simple knuckle bone and an intricately carved Roman die is the difference between a spontaneous campfire story and a meticulously scripted Netflix series. Both serve a purpose, but one certainly required more planning and polish. And think about the care. These pieces were often treasures, passed down through families, carried into battle, buried with the dead. Imagine a Roman legionary, far from home, pulling out his small pouch of tesserae flat counters for a game with his comrades, each piece worn smooth by countless hands. Or a Mayan noble, carefully arranging his patali beans, perhaps seeing in their arrangement not just a game, but a reflection of the cosmos. These aren't just game pieces. They are extensions of self, imbued with personal history and collective memory. The symbolism could be incredibly direct, like the mummiform Senet pieces, or more abstract, as with the elegant simplicity of Go stones, where the very act of placing them to surround your opponent's territory is a profound philosophical statement on control and influence. You're not just taking a piece, you're asserting your will, claiming a bit of the universe. It's a bit like trying to decide which perfectly round cookie to eat first. Do you go for the one that looks slightly more symmetrical, or the one that just feels right? The stakes, of course, are considerably lower with cookies. Usually. Ultimately, whether carved from precious ivory or plucked from a riverbed, these pawns and pieces were the heart of ancient play. They were the tangible link between the player and the game's abstract reality, bridging the gap between thought and action. They allowed people to not just imagine, but to physically manipulate armies, divine fate, journey through the afterlife, or simply count their beans. Each one a tiny testament to humanity's enduring drive to create meaning, even in play. And as you consider these miniature worlds, you begin to understand that perhaps the true magic wasn't in the pieces themselves, but in the stories they helped us tell, and the connections they forged across time and culture. You settle in, the scent of ancient dust still clinging faintly to your clothes. A phantom whisper of papyrus and clay from our journey through those glorious game boards and their symbolic pieces. Now picture yourself stepping into the grand receiving hall of an ancient Egyptian pharaoh, perhaps during the New Kingdom. The air is thick with the aroma of incense and roasting duck. Musicians pluck at harps, and slaves fan the humid air. Before you, a scene unfolds. The pharaoh himself, perhaps Ramesses II, a man whose ego was as monumental as his statues, remember those, is engaged in a game. Not just any game, mind you, but Senet, his opponent. A high priest, perhaps, or a trusted vizier. The game board is not some chipped wooden square. Oh no, this one gleams. It's crafted from polished ebony and ivory, inlaid with shimmering lapis lazuli and gold. Each piece is a miniature sculpture, probably dedicated to a specific deity. The stakes, not just bragging rights. This is a performative act, a ritual in miniature, reflecting divine order and the pharaoh's connection to the gods. You feel the weight of expectation in the room. This isn't just entertainment. It's a demonstration of strategic acumen, a silent assertion of their rightful place at the pinnacle of society. Losing might not mean your head, but it certainly wouldn't help your career trajectory. You probably won't survive this if you tried to join in with your modern plastic dice, by the way. Just a friendly heads up. Indeed, across the ancient world, from the banks of the Nile to the fertile crescent of Mesopotamia and the vast plains of China, board games were potent symbols, almost extensions of royal power. Remember the royal game of Ur. We explored its opulent materials, its connection to burial rites. Those exquisite boards found in the royal tombs of Ur, crafted from shells, red limestone, and lapis lazuli, weren't merely toys for the afterlife. They were statements, proclaiming the deceased's status and wealth even in the great beyond. Imagine the artisans, toiling for months, creating something so beautiful yet ultimately destined for a tomb. It makes you wonder if they ever thought, really? All this for a game of dice with a ghost? For the Mesopotamian elite, demonstrating mastery over such a complex game was a microcosm of mastering their kingdom. It implied a keen mind, a strategic foresight, qualities essential for a ruler. Move east to ancient China and the game of Go. While its precise origins are, well, a little hazy, the game quickly became a staple among the scholarly elite, among officials and emperors. It wasn't just a game. It was a philosophical exercise, a metaphor for warfare, statecraft, and even the Taoist concept of natural order. Playing Go demonstrated not just intelligence, but cultivation, an understanding of complex systems and long-term consequences. A true gentleman, a respected scholar, would be proficient in Go, along with calligraphy, painting, and playing a musical instrument. It was one of the four arts of the Chinese scholar, a benchmark for intellectual refinement. You wouldn't find a peasant playing on a board of polished jade, that's for sure. The sheer cost of such materials, the leisure time required to master the intricate strategies, and the cultural context of philosophical discourse inherently limited these games to the upper echelons. It's a bit like how today, your ability to collect rare vintage vinyl might signal a certain level of disposable income and refined taste. Sort of. But of course, the ancient world wasn't just kings and high priests. Below the shimmering surface of royal courts, in the bustling marketplaces and humble homes, games still thrived, albeit in simpler, more accessible forms. Take Mancala, for example, that widespread family of counting games we touched upon. While some versions might have been played on elaborate boards, many were simply scratched into dirt, or played with stones in depressions carved into rock. This wasn't about demonstrating divine right or philosophical depth. This was about community, about passing the time, about honing practical skills. Mancala, at its core, is an arithmetic game involving counting and distributing. It sharpened numerical literacy, a vital skill for traders, farmers, and anyone navigating daily life. Imagine a group of villagers gathered under a baobab tree, their laughter echoing as they strategize over a game of bao, their fingers swiftly scooping and dropping pebbles. This wasn't about reinforcing an existing hierarchy. It was about building community, about friendly competition, and perhaps a bit of low-stakes gambling. Ah, gambling. Now there's a universal equalizer, or perhaps a universal disruptor. Dice, remember our discussion about them, from bones to fortune. They were omnipresent. While the elite might use dice to decide who got to pick the next sacrificial lamb, commoners used them to risk their meager earnings. A lucky throw could mean a hot meal. An unlucky one could lead to ruin, indebtedness, or even slavery. It's a mainstream historical fact that gambling, often with dice, was rampant in ancient Rome, even though it was frequently outlawed. Emperor Claudius, for instance, was notoriously addicted to gambling and even wrote a book on the subject. Though it's long lost, probably because it was just a long list of excuses for why he lost that last game. This pervasive gambling underscores how games could both reinforce existing social structures. The rich could afford to lose more, and paradoxically, offer a fleeting chance for social mobility, however slim, through sheer luck. A quirky tidbit: some Roman dice were loaded in rather ingenious ways, confirming that cheating is truly as old as time itself. You didn't think fair play was strictly a modern invention, did you? So whether it was the grand, gilded boards of royalty or the humble depressions in the earth, games mirrored the societies that played them. They were tools for demonstrating power, for training the mind, for fostering community, and for testing fate. For the elite, games were often an extension of their public persona, a display of their inherent superiority, reinforced by the opulent materials and the strategic demands of the game. For commoners, games offered respite from toil, a chance to connect, and an opportunity for fleeting excitement, where skill and luck might momentarily blur the lines of social standing. Historians still argue whether the widespread popularity of certain games, like Senet, truly allowed for social mixing, or if different versions existed for different classes, effectively maintaining the divide. Regardless, the very presence of these games, from the simplest pebbles to the most elaborate inlaid boards, painted a vivid picture of who held power, who sought connection, and who merely hoped for a stroke of luck in the vast tapestry of the ancient world, all quietly guiding you to the next layer of this incredible story. You find yourself now, not on a sun-baked Egyptian plain or in a bustling Mesopotamian court, but in the hushed, incense-laced chambers of ancient temples, where the mundane gives way to the mystical. Here, the clatter of dice or the deliberate slide of a game piece isn't just about winning or losing. It's about touching the divine, about coaxing whispers from the cosmos. You're stepping into a realm where board games become sacred instruments, where every move, every outcome, is a conversation with destiny itself. If you think your Monday morning meeting feels high stakes, just wait until your soul's eternal journey hinges on a lucky throw of the knuckle bones. Yeah, you probably won't survive this one, at least not with your modern, rational worldview intact. Think back to Senet, that ancient Egyptian game we meandered through. Remember how it was more than just a pastime. It was a metaphor, a journey for the soul through the duet, the underworld, toward reunification with Ra. Each square, each obstacle, represented a challenge the deceased would face on their perilous journey. Playing Senet wasn't merely recreation for the living. It was a ritualistic act, a spiritual rehearsal. The movement of the pieces across the board mirrored the soul's progression, offering a tangible representation of an intangible, terrifying ordeal. Priests, or at least those deeply invested in the spiritual well-being of the departed, would play the game, perhaps even using its outcomes as a form of sympathetic magic, willing the deceased's soul safely through the afterlife. The board itself often bore hieroglyphs and symbols associated with various deities and spiritual tests, transforming a simple piece of wood into a consecrated map of the beyond. And it wasn't just Egypt. Across the Fertile Crescent, in the cradle of civilization, the royal game of Ur also held a deeper, more profound significance beyond mere regal amusement. While we discussed its strategic complexities, its role in divination was equally, if not more, crucial. The 7 rosette squares, for instance, were believed to be particularly potent, perhaps representing favorable omens or divine intervention. The movements of the pieces, often determined by the throw of tetrahedral dice, weren't random. They were messages. A specific sequence of throws or landing on a certain square could be interpreted as a sign from the gods regarding future harvests, success in battle, or even the health of the royal lineage. Imagine the high-stakes pressure. A king's future, a kingdom's fate, resting on how those black and white shell-inlaid pieces navigated a few inches of wood. Suddenly, that bad roll isn't just a lost turn. It's a divine snub, and nobody likes being snubbed by a deity. The very act of throwing dice, regardless of the game, was often seen as a direct consultation with the divine. From simple knuckle bones, the dice evolved into more sophisticated forms, but their fundamental purpose remained: to surrender control to a higher power, to let chance reveal destiny. In ancient Rome, even beyond the ludus and leisure, dice throws, tesserae, were used for augury, to interpret the will of the gods. A certain combination might indicate good fortune, while another could spell disaster. It was a cosmic coin flip, but with more sides and far more dramatic implications. You could be deciding whether to launch a military campaign or just hoping for a good day at the chariot races, and the gods were weighing in on both. Then you have games like Patali from Mesoamerica, deeply interwoven with their complex cosmology and ritual calendars. We touched on Patali's pre-Columbian play, but its spiritual heart beats loud and clear. It was played on a cross-shaped board, representing the four cardinal directions and the cosmic order. The beans, used as dice, were sacred, their fall determining not just moves, but often dictating ritual sacrifices or outcomes for crucial life events. Losing a game of Patali could sometimes lead to the forfeiture of property, or even in more extreme ceremonial contexts, ritual sacrifice. It was a literal game of life and death, reflecting the Aztec and Mayan belief in a cyclical universe, where balance had to be maintained, often through appeasement of the gods. You thought your last game of Monopoly was ruthless. Try playing for your life, where go to jail is less a square and more a decree. Historians still argue whether the primary purpose of some of these ancient games was entertainment, education, or purely religious divination. It's a chicken or egg scenario, really. Did the recreational aspect evolve into the sacred, or did the sacred rituals gradually loosen to become more informal play? Perhaps the truth lies in a constant ebb and flow, where the lines blurred so often they became indistinguishable. What is clear, however, is that ancient peoples saw the universe as an ordered, if often capricious, place, and games offered a microcosm of that order, a way to interact with it, to predict it, and perhaps even to influence it. Think about the symbolism of the pieces themselves. In many cultures, they weren't just markers. They were avatars, representations of souls, gods, or even abstract cosmic forces. Moving them around the board was like manipulating the fabric of reality, a form of active prayer or invocation. The very act of playing could be a meditation, a way to connect with the divine mind, to understand the patterns of the universe. The board became a sacred mandala, a diagram of existence, and your humble pawn, a spiritual pilgrim navigating its twists and turns. So, the next time you roll a die or move a piece across a board, just imagine for a moment that you're not just playing. You're communing. You're not just hoping for a lucky number, you're asking for a sign. You're not just trying to win, you're attempting to divine your destiny or perhaps to guide it. In the ancient world, the lines between play and piety were wonderfully, terrifyingly indistinct. Trade routes, boards on the Silk Road. The sun beats down, relentless, on an endless expanse of sand. You squint, pulling the rough fabric of your headcloth tighter against the swirling dust. The air shimmers, heat rising in waves that distort the distant, undulating line of camels. Each step crunches on gravel and grit, and the only sound is the rhythmic thud of hooves and the creak of laden panniers. This, my friend, is the Silk Road. And let me tell you, if you think packing for a weekend trip is hard, try navigating this ancient superhighway with everything you own, plus a few tons of silk, spices, and the nagging suspicion that the next oasis might be a mirage. Honestly, you probably won't survive this journey without at least a serious case of sunstroke. But hey, at least you're learning about board games. You're not just carrying silk and spices, though, are you? No, nestled amongst the valuable commodities are items far more precious in their potential to connect disparate worlds. Wooden boards, carved ivory pieces, handfuls of painted stones. For thousands of years, these dusty, arduous trails stretching from the glittering markets of Chang'an to the bustling ports of Antioch weren't just conduits for trade goods. They were arteries for ideas, for stories, and most powerfully for games. Imagine a caravan, weary from weeks of travel, finally settling down for the night. Fires crackle, shadows dance on the canvas of tents, and amidst the haggling over prices and the exchange of local gossip, a merchant from Persia pulls out a beautifully inlaid board. He sets down small, intricately carved pieces, perhaps precursors to what you'd recognize as backgammon. He gestures, inviting a weary Chinese counterpart to play. Language barriers melt away over the clatter of dice and the thoughtful placement of pieces. This wasn't just entertainment. It was diplomacy, trust-building, a shared moment of humanity in a harsh landscape. These weren't just objects being traded. They were cultural ambassadors, little portable packets of joy and strategy. The mainstream historical fact here is astounding. The sheer volume and diversity of games, or their protoforms that traversed these routes, is truly mind-boggling. Evidence suggests that games like chess, or its ancestor, Chaturanga, originated in India, then journeyed westward through Persia, reaching the Arab world before spreading into Europe. Simultaneously, variations of backgammon, known by names like nard or tavla, made similar migrations, each region tweaking the rules, altering the board's aesthetics, or even inventing new pieces to suit local tastes and materials. The cultural cross-pollination was immense. It was like the ultimate ancient world collaborative board game design project, except without the online forums and the inevitable arguments about rule ambiguities. One particularly quirky tidbit involves the accidental diffusion of game components. Historians have found evidence of game pieces made from materials sourced thousands of miles away from where they were ultimately played. Imagine a set of simple, unadorned stone pieces, maybe for a game like Mancala, found in a Central Asian dwelling. But the stones themselves, through chemical analysis, are traced back to a specific riverbed in East Africa. It's a quiet testament to the long, meandering journeys of these humble objects, carried perhaps not even intentionally for trade, but as keepsakes, as examples of craftsmanship, or even just as random bits of interesting stone picked up along the way. Sometimes, the most profound cultural exchange happens not through grand pronouncements, but through the casual dropping of a pretty pebble that inspires a new game in a new land. The Silk Road wasn't a single, well-paved highway, of course. It was a sprawling network of paths, sea lanes, and mountain passes, each presenting its own challenges. You remember the crocodile dung sunscreen we discussed? Well, good luck finding that out here in the Taklamakan Desert. It was this very fragmented, yet interconnected, nature that allowed for the slow, organic evolution of games. A merchant might learn a version of a game in Samarkand, carry it to Baghdad, and teach it to someone there who then modifies it slightly before taking it to Constantinople. Each stop on the journey was a chance for a new twist, a new rule, a new local flavor to be added to the recipe. Historians still argue whether the various forms of ancient chess-like games developed independently in different regions. or if there was a single, definitive point of origin in India from which all others diverged. The evidence from the Silk Road, however, heavily favors the latter, showing a clear westward movement of game concepts, adapting and evolving with each cultural embrace. It's almost like the game itself was a traveler, picking up new habits and accents as it went. Consider the role of the humble dice, too. Remember our discussion about dice, from bones to fortune. These small, versatile tools traveled just as widely, if not more so, than the boards themselves. A set of dice might find its way into a new culture, and suddenly, an existing game that relied on a different method of chance, or no chance at all, could be transformed into something entirely new. It's like discovering you can suddenly add turbo boosters to your ancient chariot. Suddenly, the race is a whole lot more exciting, and probably involves more crashing. The beauty of the Silk Road's influence on board games lies in this organic, fluid transmission. It wasn't about imperial decree or formal instruction. It was about shared moments. Soldiers stationed at distant outposts, bored and far from home, would teach fellow soldiers games from their own lands, or learn new ones from local populations. Pilgrims, enduring incredible hardship on their spiritual journeys, found solace and connection in a shared game during a long stopover. These interactions fostered a surprising intimacy, a common ground where differences in language, religion, or social standing temporarily faded. The exchange wasn't always one way, either. While many games flowed from east to west, there's evidence of concepts and game mechanics moving in the opposite direction, or being re-imported with new twists. It was a grand, ancient cultural exchange program, funded not by governments, but by the sheer human desire for connection, for challenge, and let's be honest, for a bit of competitive fun when you're stuck in a yurt in the middle of nowhere with only a camel for company. The Silk Road, more than just a trade route, was a game board itself, with countless players, moving pieces of culture across a vast and often unforgiving landscape. You stand on the sun-baked dust of an ancient crossroads, the scent of spices and foreign tongues mingling in the air, a sensory tapestry woven from 1,000 distant lands. A merchant unrolls a familiar-looking board, but something is off. The lines are different, the pieces a strange shade of local clay. This isn't the game you know, not quite. It's a whisper of home, reshaped by 1,000 miles of sand and 100 new ways of thinking. This is where games, much like whispers on the wind, pick up new accents, new meanings, and sometimes entirely new souls. You see, you might think a game's rules are as immutable as, say, a particularly stubborn rock. But the truth is, when a board game packs its bags and travels, it often sheds a few rules, picks up some new ones, and morphs into something. Well, something you probably won't survive trying to play by its original rules, because those rules are long gone, replaced by a dizzying array of local variations. Good luck finding the definitive version of anything. Imagine, if you will, the humble game piece. It starts its life as a meticulously carved lion in Ur, then maybe becomes a smooth river stone in India, then perhaps a repurposed bronze button in Persia. Each shift isn't just about available materials. It's about a cultural conversation, a reinterpretation of play through a new lens. Take Mancala, that vast family of counting games you remember spreading across Africa. It's not just one game. It's a living, breathing ecosystem of hundreds of variations. In one village, you might play with 2 rows of 6 pits, each with 4 seeds, simply aiming to collect the most. But just a day's journey away, you could encounter a variant with 4 rows, elaborate, capturing rules involving specific numbers of seeds. and even special pits designated as houses or stores that act as permanent banks. Some versions might allow you to sow seeds counterclockwise, others strictly clockwise, and a few truly adventurous ones might let you choose. One particularly quirky tidbit: some West African Mancala variants developed specific rules tied to agricultural cycles, dictating when and how certain moves could be made, almost turning the game into a symbolic representation of planting and harvesting. The very act of playing becomes intertwined with the rhythm of life, far beyond mere pastime. This isn't just adaptation, it's evolution at a cellular level, where the core concept of moving objects around a board to capture or accumulate is endlessly reinterpreted. The fascinating part is how core concepts, rather than precise rule sets, often diffuse. While we can't trace a direct, unbroken line from Senet's specific rules to every single race game, the idea of a journey across a board, with pitfalls and boons, certainly traveled. It's like a song with a catchy melody that gets re-recorded by a dozen different artists, each adding their own flavor, tempo, and lyrics, until it's almost unrecognizable but still evokes the original spirit. Royal Ur, with its unique rosettes and specific hit rules, might not have spawned direct clones, but the notion of competitive advancement across a track, influenced by the tumble of dice, echoed across the ancient world. It's a bit like ancient intellectual property law, if such a thing existed. You couldn't copyright the idea of a race, only the specific arrangement of squares on your personal Ur board. And let's be honest, trying to enforce that would have been a bureaucratic nightmare even for the most organized of ancient empires, probably involving more papyrus than anyone cared to handle. But perhaps the most dramatic and widely documented example of a game's transcultural shapeshifting is the journey of Chacharanga, the ancient Indian game that gave rise to chess. Imagine, if you can, a game where the king could move 2 squares on his first move, or where elephants could only jump over pieces, not slide. As Chacharanga migrated westward, carried by traders and conquerors along the Silk Road and through the Persian Empire, it encountered new cultures, new philosophies, and new strategic outlooks. In Persia, Chacharanga became Shatranj, and its pieces began to transform. The vizier replaced the general, the rook. From the Persian ruck for chariot became a powerful castle, and the elephant evolved into the bishop, changing its movement to a diagonal slide. When it reached the Arab world, further refinements occurred, emphasizing mathematical precision and strategic depth. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The queen, the most powerful piece in modern chess, was originally a relatively weak piece in Shatranj, able to move only 1 square diagonally. It wasn't until chess arrived in medieval Europe, particularly during the Spanish Renaissance, that the queen dramatically gained its sweeping powers, reflecting perhaps the growing influence of powerful female monarchs and consorts in European courts. This transformation perfectly illustrates how a game's mechanics can be subtly, or not so subtly, influenced by the prevailing social and cultural norms of its new home. It's almost like the game looked at the local political landscape and said, "Right, let's give the lady some real power for once." Historians still argue whether the exact moment of the queen's empowerment was a sudden innovation or a gradual accumulation of minor rule changes across different regions of Europe. Was it a eureka moment for some unnamed Renaissance strategist? Or did it slowly, incrementally evolve through countless games played in dimly lit taverns and grand palaces? The truth is often far messier than our neat historical narratives would prefer. The beauty of these adaptations lies in their organic nature. A game doesn't just arrive untouched. It's absorbed, digested, and then re-expressed through the local cultural filter. It might shed its original religious connotations in favor of secular entertainment, or perhaps gain new mystical interpretations. A piece representing a chariot might become a ship, or an elephant, or even a war machine, depending on the most potent military symbol of the adopting culture. These transformations are not random. They are reflections of the prevailing worldview, the available tools, and the collective imagination of the people who adopt and then inevitably adapt. You feel the grit of the desert sand between your toes, or perhaps the biting chill of the mountain air on your exposed skin. Your pack is heavy, a familiar ache in your shoulders as you trudge along, day after weary day. You're not in a grand palace, nor are you settling down by a cozy hearth. You're on the move, a soldier, a merchant, a pilgrim, or maybe just someone with an insatiable wanderlust. And yet, even here, in the harsh, unpredictable embrace of the ancient world's open road, the urge to play remains. In fact, it intensifies. What do you do when your only companions are the endless horizon and the grinding rhythm of your own footsteps? You look for something to pass the time, something to sharpen your mind, something to connect you, even briefly, to the structured order of a game board. Think about it. How do you bring a large, intricately carved Senet board, complete with its delicate pieces, across hundreds of miles of unforgiving terrain? You don't, not unless you have a personal retinue of servants and a very sturdy cart, and even then it's a gamble. This is where ingenuity truly shines. The ancient world, surprisingly, was filled with what we might call travel-sized or pocket-friendly pastimes. These weren't just toys. They were essential tools for sanity, camaraderie, and even strategic planning. Imagine a Roman legionary, tired from a long march through Gaul. He certainly doesn't have room for a full game of ludus latrunculorum in his already bursting pack. But etched into the back of his shield, perhaps, or on a small, unassuming wooden tablet that slots neatly into his belt, is a simplified grid. His pieces, pebbles collected from a riverbed, or perhaps small, carved bone fragments worn smooth by countless games. This isn't just theory. Archaeological digs at Roman military camps across Europe have unearthed precisely these kinds of compact game boards and makeshift pieces. Clear evidence of soldiers unwinding, strategizing, or just plain gambling during their downtime. It's like bringing a miniature chess set on a camping trip, only instead of a comfortable sleeping bag, you're curling up next to a slightly damp, potentially hostile patch of mud. You might not survive the next battle, but at least you'll have the solace of a well-played game to remember. Unlike that unfortunate legionnaire who tried to cheat against a centurion's spoiler alert, he didn't make it to retirement. It wasn't just soldiers, either. Traders traversing the Silk Road, their camels laden with silks and spices, needed diversions during long, quiet evenings under star-strewn skies. Pilgrims on arduous journeys to sacred sites, facing days of monotony interspersed with moments of peril, sought simple pleasures. For them, a game board might be a piece of cloth with embroidered squares, or even just a pattern drawn in the dirt with a stick, using their handful of dried dates as playing pieces. The beauty of these portable pastimes was their adaptability. If you lost a piece, you just found another pebble. If your board got soaked, you just drew a new one when the sun came out. It was gaming stripped down to its bare, essential core. The rules, the strategy, the interaction. Consider the game of Mancala, which we touched upon earlier. Its genius lies in its inherent portability. All you truly need are 2 rows of pits and a handful of counters. On the move, these pits could be scooped out of the earth, hollowed into a piece of wood, or even simply marked on a flat rock. The counters. Seeds, small stones, dried dung pellets. Yes, really, they were plentiful and round. Anything small and numerous. This adaptability allowed Mancala to spread across vast swathes of Africa, Asia, and even parts of the Americas, each region improvising its own versions based on available materials. It's the ultimate grab-and-go game, perfect for nomadic herders or merchants resting by an oasis. Sometimes the game board itself was a permanent fixture in an impermanent setting. You might stumble upon ancient caravanserais, those roadside inns for travelers, and find game boards carved into their stone benches or walls, waiting for the next weary journeyer to pick up a game. Or consider sailors, confined to the cramped quarters of their ships for months on end. Many ancient vessels had game grids carved directly into their decks or cabin timbers. Imagine the creak of the ship, the slap of waves against the hull, and the quiet click of game pieces as sailors sought refuge from the endless horizon. Historians still argue whether these portable sets were primarily for strategic training, simple entertainment, or perhaps a bit of both. A psychological balm against the monotony and terror of campaigning. Perhaps it was all three, a crucial element of mental well-being in an often brutal existence. Even dice, those tiny arbiters of fate we discussed, were perfect companions for the traveler. A few knuckle bones in a pouch, easily carried, easily deployed for a quick gamble or a simple game of chance. You didn't need a fancy board. The ground itself sufficed. They were the original instant gratification gaming accessory. No setup, no elaborate rules, just a roll and a cheer, or a groan. It's hard enough to pack for a modern vacation without forgetting something important. But imagine having to choose between an extra loaf of bread and your lucky gaming stones, when your very survival might depend on both. A tough choice, though I suppose the bread might keep you alive long enough to actually play the game. The compact nature of these games also meant they were incredibly resilient to cultural shifts. A set of rules could be easily taught, and the physical components were often so minimal that they bypassed the need for specialized artisans or rare materials. This made them ideal for cultural exchange along trade routes. A Roman merchant might teach a Persian caravaneer a simplified version of ludus latrunculorum, and in return, learn a variation of a Mesopotamian counting game. The games, like the travelers themselves, became seasoned wanderers, adapting to new landscapes and new hands. They weren't just objects. They were living traditions, mutating and evolving with every mile traversed and every new player encountered. The silent language of play, spoken across deserts, mountains, and oceans, proving that even when everything else was stripped away, humanity's desire for connection and challenge remained. Imagine, if you will, that you've stepped onto a chessboard of history, the air around you thick not with the scent of a sleepy evening, but with the buzzing tension of minds at war, albeit silently, over carved pieces and intricate lines. You feel the shift, a palpable change in the very fabric of ancient play. Gone are the days when your primary concern was simply navigating a linear path, hoping the dice gods smiled upon your meager roll. Oh, you remember those days, don't you? The seemingly endless trek through the afterlife on the Senet board, where you gambled on divine favor, praying you wouldn't land on a space that somehow invoked the spirit of that crocodile dung sunscreen vendor. It was a race, a lottery, a charmingly simple diversion for the soul. But now, as you look closer at the tables before you, you sense a different kind of energy. The players aren't just rolling and moving. They're leaning forward, brows furrowed, eyes narrowed in calculations that stretch far beyond the immediate square. This isn't about speed, it's about depth. This is where the ancient world pivoted, where the very concept of a game began to shed its skin of pure chance and emerge, glittering and complex, as a challenge to the intellect itself. You're witnessing the precise moment when raw luck started to take a backseat to cunning, foresight, and a touch of psychological warfare. You'd quickly realize that your wing-it strategy, which worked so well for dodging tax collectors in Alexandria, wasn't going to cut it here. The evolution was subtle at first, almost imperceptible to the casual observer. But suddenly, those simple racing paths began to sprout branches, intersections, and choke points. Pieces, once mere tokens of progress, gained personalities, different movements, different values, different roles in the grand scheme. Take the game of Paideia, for instance, a Greek invention that often gets overshadowed by its more famous intellectual descendants. On a grid-like board, pieces moved and captured, forming lines and trapping opponents. It was less about who rolled highest and more about who could outmaneuver, who could think several steps ahead to corner their foe. It was intellectual sparring, a microcosm of military tactics played out on a tabletop. The Romans, never ones to miss an opportunity for structured competition, took this idea and ran with it, creating ludus latrunculorum, the game of brigands. Imagine two opposing armies, represented by simple colored counters, clashing across a checkered board. Your objective wasn't to reach the end, but to strategically surround and capture your opponent's pieces, essentially eliminating their forces until only yours remained. This wasn't merely a pastime. It was an exercise in strategic thinking, a way to sharpen the minds of generals and citizens alike. The sheer variety of possible moves, the shifting dynamics of the board, demanded a level of analytical thought that was a far cry from simply moving a piece from A to B because a die told you to. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, in the heart of ancient China, the game of Go was already achieving unparalleled heights of strategic complexity. We've touched on Go before, but its significance in this evolution cannot be overstated. You don't just move pieces. You lay stones, claiming territory, creating eyes for survival, and enveloping your opponent's formations. Every move impacts the entire board, every placement a quiet declaration of intent. It's an abstract war, a dance of influence and power where a single misstep can collapse an entire empire of stones. Mainstream historical fact. Go is widely considered one of the oldest board games still played today, with an unbroken lineage of strategic evolution for over 2,500 years, making it a living testament to humanity's enduring fascination with complex challenges. And it wasn't just the rules that grew complicated. The pieces themselves began to carry more weight. No longer just identical markers, some pieces could move orthogonally, others diagonally, some even with unique leaping abilities. This differentiation added layers of decision-making. Do you sacrifice a less mobile piece to protect a more versatile one? Do you consolidate your forces or spread them out to control more territory? These were dilemmas that simple race games simply didn't present. Here, every decision felt weighted, every move a choice that could ripple across the board with devastating consequences. You might not literally lose your head over a bad move, but your social standing among your fellow strategists. That could definitely take a fatal blow. The rise of these strategic behemoths also signaled a subtle but profound shift in how games were perceived. They weren't just for children or for idle amusement. They became intellectual pursuits, tools for sharpening the mind. Philosophers discussed game theory long before the term existed, dissecting optimal strategies and the psychology of opponents. Military leaders reputedly used them to train their minds for battlefield maneuvers. Historians still argue whether the complexity of these games developed organically from simpler forms, or if distinct, more sophisticated games were conceived fully formed by particularly brilliant minds, perhaps after an exceptionally strong cup of fermented mare's milk. It's hard to say for sure. Consider, too, the quirky tidbit that some early Go boards unearthed were not just made of wood, but were sometimes carved directly into the stone floors of temples, or even, in one particularly fascinating instance, into the lid of a burial coffin. This suggests that the strategic challenge was so profound, so captivating, that it was believed to be a pursuit even beyond life itself, either as a way to keep the deceased occupied, or perhaps to test their eternal strategic acumen. It certainly beats counting grains of sand for eternity, doesn't it? This strategic evolution was about more than just rules. It was about the cultivation of a different kind of human intelligence. It fostered logical deduction, pattern recognition, risk assessment, and the ability to think several turns ahead. It moved games beyond mere entertainment and into the realm of intellectual training. You are now standing at the threshold of a new era of play, where the mind, rather than blind fortune, became the ultimate weapon. And truly, in the grand cosmic game of existence, you probably won't survive this level of intellectual rigor without a strong cup of chamomile and a good night's sleep after. The desert wind whispers across ancient sands, carrying secrets older than memory. You feel the grit between your teeth, the sun beating down on your neck, as you kneel beside a faint indentation in the earth. It's not much, just a few scratched lines, a scattering of oddly shaped stones, but to the right eye, it's a whisper from a game long forgotten. You're not just looking at a historical curiosity. You're looking at a puzzle, a riddle wrapped in millennia of dust. And honestly, solving it might be the last thing you ever do. No, not because of booby traps or anything dramatic, but because the sheer, mind-numbing tedium of piecing together fragments of a game no one has played for thousands of years. Yeah, that could definitely put you 6 feet under, but from sheer boredom. Imagine spending your days sifting through broken pottery and ambiguous markings, trying to figure out if that chipped bit was a king or just a particularly lumpy pebble. It's not exactly Indiana Jones, is it? More like Indiana Jones and the bureaucratic nightmare of uncategorized artifacts. But this is where the real adventure lies, deep in the dirt, unearthing the ghosts of ancient pastimes. Our journey through the board games of the ancient world has shown you so much. From the strategic depths of Go to the humble counting of Mancala. But for every game we understand, there are dozens, perhaps hundreds, that remain stubbornly silent, waiting to be deciphered. Take, for instance, the fascinating yet elusive game of the hounds and jackals. We have exquisite game boards and pieces, often found in tombs, depicting elongated dogs and jackals on pegs, but the rules. They're a complete mystery. We know it was popular in ancient Egypt and the Near East, dating back to at least 2000 BCE, but how you actually played it, what the objective was, how movement was determined, that's all conjecture. Mainstream historical consensus suggests it was likely a race game, given the linear tracks on the boards, similar to Senet, but beyond that, it's an educated guess. Here's a quirky tidbit for you. Some theories propose that the game might have been less about winning and more about a ritualistic journey, mimicking the passage of souls. Perhaps it was a symbolic race through the afterlife, with each space representing a stage of transformation. Imagine a game where the goal isn't to get to the end first, but to complete the journey correctly. Historians still argue whether the elaborate iconography found on some hounds and jackals boards implies a purely secular pastime, or if it held deeper religious significance, much like Senet's connection to the underworld. The challenge lies in the complete absence of written rules. Unlike some games where inscriptions or papyri give us clues, for many lost games, all we have are the physical remains, and those, bless their dusty hearts, don't come with instruction manuals. So how do we even begin to reconstruct these shadowy echoes of play? It's a painstaking process, often involving a blend of archaeology, comparative studies, and a healthy dose of informed speculation. When archaeologists unearth a new game, the first step is meticulous documentation of the board, pieces, and any associated artifacts. Context is everything. Is it found in a tomb, a domestic dwelling, a temple? What other objects are nearby? For games like the royal game of Ur, remember that discovery led to the eventual, partial reconstruction of its rules, partly because of a Babylonian tablet describing gameplay. But for many others, like the mysterious game of 20 squares, a relative of Ur found in various locations across the Near East, but with regional variations that confound a single set of rules, such texts are missing. This is where comparative analysis comes in. If a newly discovered board shares similarities with known games, scholars can draw parallels, hypothesizing rule mechanisms. For instance, if a board has a clear starting and ending point, it's a strong indicator of a race game. The ongoing efforts often involve creating physical reproductions of these ancient games based on archaeological finds. Then, modern game designers and historians will literally play-test them, experimenting with different rule sets based on what little evidence exists, trying to find a balance that feels plausible and engaging. It's like trying to bake a cake with only a list of ingredients and no instructions. You know you need flour and sugar, but is it a cupcake or a sourdough loaf? The ultimate goal isn't necessarily to find the exact original rules, which is often impossible, but to create a playable version that respects the archaeological evidence and offers insight into the mindsets and leisure activities of our ancient ancestors. And as you gaze at those faint scratches in the dirt, you realize that every reconstructed game isn't just a win for history. It's a chance to play a small, silent part in a game that has spanned millennia. You stand now not in a sun-baked marketplace in Ur, nor in the hushed halls of an Egyptian temple, but perhaps in your own living room or a friend's. The air is cool, the world outside hushed. You pick up a game piece, maybe a knight, an ivory disc, or a simple wooden token. It feels familiar, doesn't it? The smooth, cool weight in your palm, the subtle texture beneath your thumb. The gentle click as you place it on a square, the soft thud of a die hitting the table. These aren't just sounds, they are echoes. Echoes of countless hands that have touched similar pieces, rolled similar dice, and contemplated similar moves across millennia. You're not just playing. You're participating in an unbroken lineage of human ingenuity and delight. A silent conversation with every king, commoner, and child who ever found joy in the structured chaos of a board. Though, let's be honest with ourselves for a moment. If you were actually transported back to ancient Rome and challenged to a game of ludus duodecim scriptorum by a seasoned legionnaire, A man who probably played daily to pass the time between arduous marches and terrifying battles, all while worrying about not getting eaten by a lion in the arena later. Your chances of victory would be, well, let's just say they'd be less than stellar. You probably won't survive this, not the game itself, but the sheer, overwhelming intensity of ancient life that would make a board game feel like the least of your worries. Yet here you are, comfortable and safe, and the game unfolds before you. Think of chess. That intricate dance of kings and queens, knights and bishops, pawns relentlessly advancing. Its direct ancestor, the ancient Indian game of chaturanga, emerged around the 6th century AD. The core concept, a strategic battle played on a grid, pieces with distinct movements, the objective to capture the opponent's king. It's all there, just refined and evolved. It's a mainstream historical fact that this ancient Indian game, with its 4 divisions, infantry, cavalry, elephants, and chariots, directly prefigured our modern pawns, knights, bishops, and rooks. Imagine trying to explain to a Roman legionnaire that his sophisticated ludus ducem scriptorum was basically just a really complicated version of what would one day be called backgammon, a game everyone's grandma plays. His toga would probably fall off in shock. And speaking of backgammon, its lineage stretches back even further, undeniably linked to the royal game of Ur and Senet. The fundamental mechanics, a race around a track, dictated by dice rolls with elements of blocking and capture, are strikingly similar. It proves that some game structures are so inherently satisfying, so perfectly balanced between chance and skill, that they become timeless. Even checkers, or drafts as it's known across the pond, owes a debt to games like Quirk, a widespread ancient game that emphasized simple capture and strategic movement. Then there are the counting games, the Mancala variations, which you encountered spreading like wildfire across ancient Africa. These deceptively simple games, where you distribute seeds or stones from pits, are still played today, not just across Africa, but also in parts of Asia and the Caribbean. Their rules might seem basic, but they conceal layers of deep strategic complexity, often demanding foresight and rapid calculation. It's a quirky tidbit, but remember those elaborate Roman game boards, sometimes carved directly into public spaces. Well, the urge to deface public property with game boards hasn't truly died out. Even today, you can find crude tic-tac-toe grids scratched into picnic tables or bus stop benches, a humble, modern echo of that ancient, irresistible impulse to play, no matter the available surface. The enduring appeal of board games from antiquity to today lies in their multifaceted nature. They offer strategy, the profound satisfaction of outwitting an opponent, of planning moves and anticipating consequences. They foster social interaction, acting as perfect icebreakers, tools for family bonding, or fierce competitive arenas. They provide escapism, a temporary dive into a constructed reality, a welcome distraction from the daily grind. And they sharpen the mind, honing problem-solving skills, critical thinking, and pattern recognition. Historians still argue whether the transition from games focused purely on chance to those emphasizing deep strategy was a gradual, organic evolution driven by human intellect, or if specific cultural or philosophical shifts spurred this development in different regions simultaneously. Was it independent invention or diffused influence that led to parallel strategic complexities across the ancient world? We may never truly know, and while we might not be playing for our souls or our next meal anymore, unless it's a particularly intense game of Monopoly, in which case, good luck. The fundamental human desire to engage, to challenge, and perhaps, just perhaps, to gloat a little when you win, remains as strong as ever. The soft glow of the ancient world fades now, like embers cooling in a hearth. The whispers of distant dice rolls, the clatter of bone pieces, the murmur of strategizing voices, they all gentle into silence. You close your eyes, and the vibrant tapestry of ancient games, once so vivid, begins to soften, the edges blurring into a gentle mist. There's no need to hold onto the images too tightly. They are simply there, woven into the fabric of time, a quiet testament to a shared human journey. The intricate patterns of the royal game of Ur, the symbolic journey of Senet, the quiet contemplation of Go, they are not gone, but have transformed, shifted, and settled into the quiet corners of our collective memory, becoming the very foundations of the games we cherish today. Allow your thoughts to drift, to become as light as the dust motes dancing in a beam of moonlight. The great strategists of old, the pharaohs, the emperors, the everyday folk who found solace and challenge in their boards, they too found rest after their games were played. Their legacies, their moments of triumph and quiet contemplation over a game, have settled into the vast, calm ocean of history, leaving only the gentlest ripples. There's no rush, no urgency, just the quiet breath of the night around you, a soft embrace. Let your mind become still, peaceful, like the surface of a calm lake under a moonlit sky. Everything is settled, everything is peaceful. Just rest now, sweet dreams.